大家好，我叫 Duncan，我住在中国差不多4年，但是我还是说的不好，所以下面我会用英文。So I work for PopCap, the Shanghai office, and I'm a game designer and senior producer. So hopefully at the end of today we're going to learn some cool stuff about how to be successful in China. And thanks again for the introduction, and we'll just move on. Thanks a lot for the water. By the way, the reason I have these toys up here is I figure at the end of this we can just throw some of them out. So if any of you guys want toys, yeah, don't worry, I'll remember you guys over there. And if I make any big mistakes, then usually I try to cover up by throwing out a toy, so that also works. So we're going to discuss briefly the popularity of Plants vs. Zombies in China, and then we'll talk about how we found our success. We actually didn't start being very successful, and everyone loves a list, so we have our 10 things that we learned. So, everyone knows Plants vs. Zombies, so these slides are just to kind of demonstrate exactly how crazy the popularity of this game is. In America, Plants vs. Zombies is a pretty good game, and it's really popular, but in China, there's like something kind of insane about it. People decorate their homes in Plants vs. Zombies theme. It's every kind of product that you can make has a Plants vs. Zombies pirate version. This is just a picture at a mall. We decked out one of the local malls with Plants vs. Zombies stuff, and kids come, and yeah, it's awesome. I actually don't remember what this game show is, but it's a game show using some Plants vs. Zombies thing. Let's have a few pictures that just show some random cool stuff. This is actually before we were kind of successful and we couldn't afford models. So there I am, and one of the models for our clothing line. So this is actually when we launched our clothing line in Shanghai. This is a Meters Banwei store, and this is, I think it's their flagship store. I don't really have a good picture that shows exactly how crazy this was, but the line of people, if you've ever been to Shanghai, there's a street called Nanjing Lu, and it's a really high traffic area, and this line is going all the way around the building. It's really, really quite a lot of people that showed up to buy Plants vs. Zombies clothes on opening day. This is inside the store. This is a recent China Joy. Yeah, there's a cute girl here, but actually what they've got their hands up for is these. At the time of the show, when we were like, okay, we're going to throw some of these out, basically like people were knocking over each other to get to the stage to get these things. So this group of the slide is just to show just how insane the popularity is. And you'll see why I make that point in a moment. This is Tian Tian Shang Shang. It's a very popular talk show. There I am again on the right. If you want to see something horrible, you can go find the video for this. I danced on TV. So, the point is that, wow, why should we listen to this guy? It sounds like Plants vs. Zombies is so popular. How hard could it be to be successful in China with this game? It must be like this. It must just be super easy. But actually, it's kind of like this. This is one of my favorite pictures. A friend of mine took this picture. There's actually a little guy on a bike in the middle. And he's on a crowded street kind of near our office. And it's insane, I can't imagine. I almost couldn't believe it when I saw the photo. I thought maybe she photoshopped it. But this is kind of how it was for us to be successful in China. So even the game is very, very popular. And everyone is playing it. they're not paying any money. We're making almost nothing. I think we did some market research and determined like something like 40% of the country had played our game, but none of them had spent any money. So we made the office in Shanghai, and probably the first 2 or 3 years, we were actually pretty unsuccessful. My boss isn't comfortable if I list all the failed projects that we tried, but we launched 2 or 3 projects, Plants vs. Zombies stuff, and they were totally flops, not successful at all. And we have our straight iOS port of the Plants vs. Zombies. That was making a little bit of money, but not the kind of money that supports a studio like ours. So the point is Plants vs. Zombies is super popular, but that's not enough. So finally, we made the Great Wall edition of Plants vs. Zombies. And that was successful. And I'm not going to dive into it. I'm sure you guys have already seen it. That's not the point of the talk. But we wrapped up everything that we learned in that with Plants vs. Zombies 2. And I like this slide because, for Plants vs. Zombies 1, after we launched that game, it was about a year before we had 1 million installs. And Plants vs. Zombies 2 we launched in China. And the iOS version got 1 million installs in 1 day. So we went from a year to a day. So we learned a lot struggling here. So if you watch the whole talk, you'll figure out how to do that too. So that was iOS. The Android is really where it's at. So can anyone guess how long it took us to get 1 million installs on PVZ2 China Android? We know iOS was 1 day. For Android, anyone?
1 hour.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. 1 hour. Who said that? Somewhere over there. I'll throw a toy over there in the end. Yeah, it's 1 hour. It's crazy, huh? So what are all the things we learned? That's the point of the talk, right? So here's our list. The first 2 are kind of throwaways. We'll skip to those pretty quickly. Yeah, we'll dive in. Let's have a look. So the first one is patience. Even you have a very popular game, and even everybody is downloading them and playing it, it doesn't mean that you're going to win. So this is one of the biggest lessons we learned is you just really have to be patient. And we've seen a lot of other companies come to China and make a big investment, and their first thing fails, and then they leave. You really have to be prepared to be there for a while. Don't think you're going to just launch something in China and get your money back. So you have to really work for it. I don't feel like I have to talk about this, but it's up here because I still know people in China, Chinese people actually, that launch games in China that are not free to play, and I don't understand it. Don't do that. You should make free to play games. Otherwise they will pirate them. This is just a few things from Great Wall Edition. I don't really feel like you need to study this for free-to-play design. You guys know how to make free-to-play games, but it's just there for completeness. So be patient and make free-to-play games. So let's get to the real stuff. Corporate structure. This was really huge for us. The guy who started our studio fought very, very hard with our corporate to make sure that we were an autonomous studio. Meaning we own the ability to make all of our own decisions. We don't have to ask permission to do anything in our China office. And that is really, really critical if you guys are thinking of trying to do something in China. Whoever is in charge of your China operations needs to actually be in charge of your China operations. Here's why. I love this. I didn't take the first picture, I stole that, but I took this one over here. This was right outside our office. So the story is let's imagine, I'll use America for example. Let's imagine that you have this business in America and you sell pet dogs. You sell dogs. Maybe you sell dogs like this, that breed. And you want to expand to China for some strange reason. And you come to China, and you have an operation here, and they phone home. They say, boss, we've got to start painting our dogs to look like tigers. You know, that guy will just be fired. You know, no one is going to, they're not even going to entertain that kind of conversation. But the truth is that this actually happens in China. And this is one that hasn't been sold. He's painted that way to be sold. Regardless of whatever you think about this, the point is that you have to be present in China to win in China, and you have to be able to respond to things that are happening in the market. And if you have to phone home to corporate and have a big meeting that takes weeks of explaining and being like, look, I know it sounds really bizarre, but this is happening here, and they're going to be very resistant to that, and you have to be able to move at what we call China speed. If you can't move at China speed, then you can't win in China. To win in China speed, you need your corporate autonomy. These are our tiger dogs. So when we came here, there wasn't really any Plants vs. Zombies merchandise, and to suggest to do so much of it was weird to our American office. They can't really understand that, and it makes sense because in America, nobody would expect that you'd sell 25 million books with Plants vs. Zombies. That's just insane. You know, whenever we report this number back to America, they think that we made a mistake. Like, you put another zero there, you got a typo. You didn't sell 25 million books, because if that was in America, that would be like at the top of the list. Like, that's like Twilight and Harry Potter. But that's true. So if we had to sit there and argue with them, like, look, we think there's this opportunity for books. We're not making money in software yet, but we got this book idea, we'd just be fired. But because we have our corporate autonomy, we can do that here, and we can be successful with it. So, okay. Hope I made the point. I'm going to get some water here. Android. Do I need to talk about this? I do. So I still know Chinese studios in China that release games only on iPhone. Don't do that. I made the picture to scale. So even you're at the top of the iPhone list. You're the number one game. You're the number one at the bottom. You're the biggest fish in a little pond. You know, Android is like, I don't actually know what it is this year, but we'll say approximately 10x. So make Android games. I'm not saying don't make iOS games, but don't forget Android. Here's some app stores, Android app stores in China. It's just to show how many there are. There's actually more than 500 of them. We'll talk more about that problem later. This part becomes really important when you start learning how many app stores you have to support. So there's a lot of channels, and when you launch your game, you don't have to launch them on all 500, obviously, but you should launch them on a good chunk of them. Maybe something like this group here. For Plants vs. Zombies 2, I believe we launched, don't quote me on this, I'll say more than 25, less than 30 on the first day. So 25 different APK files, 25 different channels on the first day. That's just the first day. The next day there were more and more and more. And I think now we're in hundreds of channels. But the point is you're going to be in a lot of Android channels. You need to master that domain. You need to master communicating with those different channels and getting those deals. Which leads us to this. Your business team. You really need to have a Chinese business team. You need to have the sharks in your company. If you don't, when you communicate with those channels, all those 500 channels, they will have those sharks. And your guys will lose. Okay. So you need to have a strong business team if you want to engage with China. And I would say you probably need that business guy or that business team to be Chinese. At least 2 or 3 of them. Billing. So there's so many complex ways of doing billing in China. This is the 3 major telcos, and they're awesome because they introduced SMS payments. This is how you should be doing billing for your games. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but this one's pretty much the way to go. You want your SMS payments. The users in China are pretty fickle about paying money, so you need to make it as easy as humanly possible to give you money. And that's why SMS payments rock, because there's no account, there's no password, you're already using your phones, you're already logged into the fact that you have your phone number. So, yeah, he's a pirate over here. Yar, even he likes it. Only 2 clicks. So, basically, you pop up this dialogue, and after they've clicked buy, they only have one more thing that they need to click. And there's no login. It's beautiful. You should absolutely be using this. Build security. In the USA, you can worry about build security, but you don't really need to too much. You'll get some pirates, like, I don't know, maybe 10%. But in China, if you don't have stringent build security, it's probably close to 99%. Even with the stuff that we do, we still find that probably more than 50% of our purchases are fraudulent, even with this. If we didn't do this, it would probably be 99%. And we don't even do authoritative server for everything, but I notice a lot of Chinese games coming out these days from places like Tencent do authoritative servers for almost every button click. You should probably think about that. This is about build complexity. This is the one that really gets people. You know, in most countries you can kind of avoid Android and you can kind of just do an iOS build. And yeah, there's a lot of different iOS devices, but they're pretty much all the same device, right? Apple's done a really good job making the API transparent to their devices, so it's pretty easy. And your billing is also built into iOS. And your channel, your distribution channel, is also all built. It's all just one thing. It's just 1 times 1 times 1, so you have a complexity of 1. But in China, you have all of these thousands of devices. You have a bunch of channels, 500 channels, and you have maybe 10 or 20 different billing solutions. So your complexity is enormous, and this crushes teams that are not prepared for it. I've actually heard of some studios, some of the bigger studios, that have 200-man teams of engineers whose only job is to do SDK integration. Because every channel that you're integrating with, all those little platforms that you're distributing, they all have their own little SDK that they want you to implement. And the billing solutions also. So, be prepared for that. You might have to reconsider how you do your engineering. This is an awesome one, localization. So, Plants vs. Zombies, translate Chinese, 这是张氏. We're finished, right? So, it's not just about translating your stuff into Chinese. I put 10%, but probably it's more like 5%. A lot of teams think of localization as like a task. Maybe an intern does it, maybe they outsource it. You translate all your stuff. But you're really missing a big opportunity, because localization or adaptation is your opportunity to engage that market. And different markets like different content. Chinese, they like Chinese content. Here's some of our stuff. You know, none of this is in the original game. We added all of this just for China. And actually, this stuff doesn't even go outside of China, so we don't even put this stuff in the Western builds. I think this is from Great Wall. And this is from the Journey to the West expansion. So we put lots and lots of Chinese-themed content, and it's not just about translating the text. In fact, you could almost say translating the text is not even that important. This is my favorite gotcha, actually. Data packages. So when we first launched Plants vs. Zombies, let me give a disclaimer about this one. If you're making like some kind of like AAA style 3D, terabyte download thing, then this doesn't really apply to you. There's no way you can solve that problem. This is for people who are targeting mass market. People who want everyone to download your game. Everyone from 10 to 100. In China, we have these data packages over here. 48%, we can basically say 50%. So we can basically say 50% of the country is on this 10 megabyte plan. What does that mean? It means every month they get 10 megabytes. If they download more than that, they have to pay, and they don't like paying. So that means the ideal scenario is that your game is less than 10 megs. I can't put the DAU numbers on here, but this is megabytes. So when we finally figured out how to make money and to do it well, and we launched the Great Wall, we launched it it was approximately 80 megs. And over here, can't see the number here, but we landed around 8 megs when we were finished, after many, many updates. You can see the DAU. So basically, the smaller you get your game, the more people want to download it. It kind of just makes logical sense, but when you know why, then it really, really makes sense. So the interesting thing about this is people instinctively want to ask us, so does that mean you're making a very low quality game? Like you're reducing your textures and you're pulling out sounds and this sort of stuff? And it's like, well, yeah, in a way, we're bringing the quality level down. But what you have to understand is, for 50% of the country, when you cross that 10 megabyte barrier, that might be your lowest quality version of the game that you've made from your point of view. But from your audience's point of view, that's the highest quality game that they can now download. Okay? Let that sink in. This is a cool quote from Michelangelo. Yeah. I think something, I don't remember exactly how the story goes. I think it's like the Pope asked him, like, how did you make a statue of David? You just removed everything that isn't David. So that's what you should do. We just removed everything that isn't important to the Chinese fans of Plants vs. Zombies. So that turned out to be like a lot of sound, a lot of music, and we found that most people play with the sound off. So why are we storing 20 megs of music if they're not even listening to it? So how do you figure out what they're listening to? You have analytics. So I think in the West, analytics is it's a very cool feature and it's very nice to have, but I wouldn't say it's required. But in China, if you remember, all of those channels that you're in and all of those different billing solutions and all the different devices, it can be very, very challenging to figure out what's going on with your product. Let's say, because you can't roll out updates, across all of your partners at once. It's impossible. Let's say that you roll out a new feature, and you want this feature to increase, retention. And you roll that out on these 10 partners over these 10 channels. But unbeknownst to you, these 5 channels over here started featuring your game. So you're getting crazy downloads from these guys. And then these 20 over here, they were featuring your game, but they stopped featuring your game. And you're trying to look at your data, and it's like, what's going on? So you really have to have really in-depth analytics to get a handle on this. It's a requirement. Yeah, am I the favorite plant? These are some cool things you can think about measuring that maybe most people, well, a lot of these are pretty obvious, but some of them are not obvious. Is the sound turned on? You know, if the sound's not turned on on the most of your users, then you should probably lose the sound and get more DAU. Do they have Wi-Fi? You know, this kind of thing can inform how you do updates. Like, do you want to be pushing fat data down on your users on a weekly basis? But if all of them are not on Wi-Fi most of the time, then you know that they're going to be resistant to that, and you're actually going to lose your user base when you do that. So basically, like, figuring out who are your users and how they are using your game, even what time they're using it. You know, maybe if everyone is using it at lunchtime, then you can do some sort of weird, funny lunch thing. Anyway, a lot of people ask me, you know, because a lot of the previous, all this stuff in the talk is just about sort of like wisdom that you implement on your own in your own studio. But this one is usually like you have to go out and get like some analytics package. A lot of guys ask me, like, which one should I get? And you know, they all kind of do the same thing, and they're all pretty reasonably well done. But I recommend this one. And it does all this other stuff, but the reason that we use it is because it pairs analytics and A/B testing in the same package. So A/B testing is another thing that you need to be doing. And the annoying thing about analytics and A/B testing, you need them both, but usually it's a different provider serving both of these things. Usually you have a different third-party A/B testing solution, and you have a different third-party analytics solution. And I swear, every analytics package I've used, I always email them and I say, you need to add A/B testing, because the reality of what happens is we all get in these boardroom meetings and we're all like trying to pull the data from the A/B testing and pull the data from the analytics and put it in one Excel document, and that's annoying. And these guys do it in one. So, pretty useful. I can't show you the stuff that we A/B test. I'm just not allowed to. But just to give you a simple example of how deep you can go with just a very, very simple thing, I just whipped this up in Photoshop real quick. But this is a typical thing you might see in a mobile game when you go to buy some item, right? And you can see over on the right there's quite a lot of things that you could A/B test just with this one screen. So you need analytics and you need A/B testing. And you guys should check out this guy. And check out Keith. So we're supposed to be 30 minutes and we're at 27 and a half. So if you have questions, don't worry, I didn't forget about the toys. So, you may want to mark.
这样请问一下，就是因为其实像那个中国那边很多装置，还有很多那个 Store 平台的问题啊，对吧？然后其实是目前有看到一些厂商提供那个一些就是 APK 让你接到各个平台上面，对，它在支援这一些。对，那这个部分的话，因为我不太清楚说到底这边到底影响是有多大，可以大概问一下这一类是有相关的影响，还是说就是该怎么讲？是这个这部分影响对后续需要接到各个平台上面的情况 会改善很多吗？还是说目前只是在初步的阶段？
Translate. That was a long question. We got a translator here.
Okay, so what he's asking is now there are providers in China that basically integrates with different companies. Has that made your work easier?
No. No. Because a lot of these, yeah, I can just say no. You still need your business team. You still need to engage all of these different providers because there's really quite a lot of them. And also, a lot of them are pretty competitive with each other, and there's kind of a lot of politics involved. So, like, if you get on this guy's platform, these guys won't even talk to you. So, I know what you're talking about. There's those couple companies that made these sort of package deals, and maybe that's okay if you just want like to try it out and sort of have like a moderate level of success. But if you want to engage the whole country in the way that we have, you can't do that. You have to be your own package. Got one over here.
我想知道那个有没有想过，他有一天会像 Angel Bird 一样退烧，然后有没有想过要怎么去延续这款游戏的生命？
We're not worried about that. The way that we control it is we try to come up with new ways for people to engage with our IP. First of all, this kind of question kind of only applies to someone like us. To have a super brand, and will the super brand ever die out? But the thing is once you have a super brand, you do stuff like this. You do merchandise. You do not just the main tower defense game, we have other games. In fact, we recently just launched a card game, a collectible card game, Plants vs. Zombies All-Stars. So we're constantly coming up with new ways for people to use Plants vs. Zombies, not just in the classic tower defense games, because we're only launching the tower defense games pretty seldomly. Every few years, maybe one of them will come out. But between those times, we have a bunch of other smaller products that come out in China that are nothing to do with tower defense. So that's the way that we keep it going.
你好，我想请问一下，就是因为我们这个，因为我们公司从不同的国家来，会不会在大陆有不一样的影响？我们必须因为好像在大陆地区，欧美国家会比较受到欢迎。 可是日本的国家好像就很难加入这个市场。那你在当地有没有观察到任何，比如说因为国籍所造成的一些问题，或是说因为一些背景不同所造成的不同的困难呢？
No, I think it's just the game. I think it's just luck. Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with being from which country.
I have a question about localization because I've heard there's a video from Yoku and they have said the diamond to purchase an item for the Chinese version of this game is more expensive than the original version.
You're almost right. I'm glad someone asked that. So the question is always, why is the Chinese version different? But actually, the Chinese version launched first. The US version launched second. So the question should be, why is the US version different? Not why the Chinese version is different. As to why the Chinese have a harder version, that's something you have to think about for the way you specifically address that market. So when we did Plants vs. Zombies 1, we actually got a lot of feedback from Chinese users that the game was too easy. So we made their version harder. It's pretty simple. In terms of the economics, like I said, even when we do all of our anti-piracy stuff, we still get a very large amount of users that defeat that anti-hacking, those techniques. So we still have a lot of fraudulent purchases. So if we made the economics the exact same as another version, then basically we would have to close our studio because we weren't making money. And this practice is fairly, I would say, fairly common across the market in China. This is basically what all of the successful Chinese studios do. So.
好，那不好意思，因为时间的关系，我们最后这一场的 Q&A 只能进行到这一边。那我们就再感谢一次这个Duncan来我们这边进来分享。
We have toys. We have brought out some toys here. Who are the people over here that wanted toys? This one? Which one?
没有花，我一边只有一个哦。好，拿后面。That's one. I give you.
I'm gonna pass out on this side just because, way back there. You guys are actually pretty civil. China, I get rushed on the stage.
OK， 好，那我们就最后一次再掌声谢谢大家。